How's it going, everybody? This is Dave Meltzer. We're going to be here for the next 2 hours talking pro wrestling, and I'm really excited about today's show. We're going to have Bob Mould. Actually, he's in studio in New York. We'll be talking about the last year and a half or so of World Championship Wrestling. Bob Mould was part of the writing team, and we're going to get a lot of insight as to what was going on in the company and when it came to writing and things like that. So we'll be doing that in a while. We, of course, have Bryan Alvarez here. We've got a lot of news to talk about stemming from last night's show. I think the first thing that we're going to talk about is the main event with Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle, which was both an outstanding match and also a scary match in that I didn't have a problem with one move that was done in that match, but I had a problem with the fact that so many moves were done in one match that I felt just like one. It's almost like because they did so many big spots, the dangerous spots lost their effect, and I don't know. It was. I had a bad feeling when it was over. We've had a lot of emails negative about not about the effort, obviously, of the guys, but about the can you top this mentality. You know, some people noting that we just had a big injury on Friday, and I know Bryan was pretty upset when he watched the match. So, Bryan, why don't you talk a little bit about that too?
I was just angry because I look back at Jimmy Snuka jumping off a cage, and nobody is ever going to forget that. And here you had a match where Chris Benoit did a diving headbutt off the top of the cage, basically with one arm, and you had Kurt Angle doing a moonsault off the top of the cage, which didn't even lead to the finish. And I can maybe understand if everything was built up to that one spot. He did a moonsault, he missed it, and it was the finish of the match, and everybody would remember it. But it was just like something they did in the middle, a transition spot. And I looked at that match, and personally, I don't know if you can actually, say this for certain, but I think that both guys had some time taken off their careers in that match just from those two bumps alone. Benoit because he's hurt right now and he's doing this like I said with one arm, and Angle. I mean, I don't care what you say, going off with a moonsault like that and landing on your knee, you're not going to wake up the next day and be in perfect shape, and there's going to be some damage to the knee. And the whole thing to me was you had a match where there were these two guys killing each other. And Steve Austin got involved, and the whole point of the match was to put heat on Steve Austin as this guy going into the King of the Ring. But the problem is that I don't think there's anybody in the entire world, and you could tell by watching the opening segment when they announced the match, that actually believes that Steve Austin is going to lose this match. And to me, it was kind of a waste of a cage match, and it was such a tremendous match, and I don't want to say anything bad about either guy, but to put that match on there and do what they did for, basically a storyline leading into a pay-per-view that, I don't know, it's not going to help Benoit. Benoit lost, by the way. It's not going to help Jericho earlier in the show to lose. And I mean, just watching the whole show, I was really depressed when it was over.
The Jericho thing made absolutely no sense to me because...
Actually, I got to say one thing about Jericho. I think that I know what they were trying to do, and that was to show that one man cannot beat two in a handicap match, but
Good.
it was
Show us another time.
Wrong guy. And sure, it makes sense if Rhino's challenging for the belt, but he's not.
Well, I mean, it's like I think that the whole thing is that we all know that Benoit and Jericho were mid-card guys until getting the mega push a couple of weeks ago, and they need all the help they can get, and they haven't given them all that help they can get. I mean, they've given them they've had great matches, but it was like, what was the point? It's like you've got Chris Jericho in a main event in 2 weeks. And a main event that the people are not into, as you could tell by the reaction when Linda McMahon said that match, I think that the pay-per-view main event should have been Austin and Benoit. I really do. Looking back on everything. I think the suggestion of doing doing Benoit and Jericho in a singles match early in the show and then the winner facing Austin later, and then the other guy can get involved in the finish if that needs to be. You can do exactly what you want to do out of this three-way. I think that makes for a better show than the three-way. I didn't sense when Linda McMahon announced the three-way, it was kind of like, people kind of was like, is that what it is? And then the two guys that are challenging for the title both lose. I didn't understand that at all. I mean, it's like, it's great to build up Rhino, but not at the expense of your main event. And I know what the idea was, and obviously I'm sure they're both going to get big wins, on the SmackDown tapings tonight, but what's the purpose of showing them losing going into the pay-per-view? There's no upside to this.
Especially when you have Rhino cutting a promo afterwards pointing out, I have beaten Chris Jericho three times in a row. And it's like, well, okay, why aren't you in the main event and why is he?
Yeah, exactly. And also the other thing is that with Jericho in that handicap match, there were and it was the same thing in that tag match on SmackDown. But in this tag match at SmackDown, it didn't bother me because there was a whole storyline where these guys prevailed against all odds. But when you have a guy who is challenging for the world title, your babyface, your top, you can have a mid-card babyface throw forearms to the Giant or something like that where the Giant doesn't sell. And there's nothing wrong with that because he's so much bigger and you're getting over the size. But the main event babyface, the guy's got to stagger. The guy's got to sell a little bit. And it happened again last night where Jericho was doing a comeback on that guy, and the guy, laughed it off. And it's like, granted, there's a size difference, but you just don't put that spot in the match when this guy, this guy's trying to challenge Steve Austin for the world title, and he can't even make a dent on this big Giant. It's like, who's going to have faith in him beating Steve Austin, who's, the biggest wrestling star in the world, supposedly? I mean, the show last night, again, it's like they're spending more time pushing Austin, who, granted, is a guy who needs to be given a little bit of a juice, a push right now because the heel thing isn't selling tickets. But those other guys are in the match. If it's just Austin by himself, you need to have faith in those faces. I loved as a wrestling match, Benoit and Angle. When Angle did the moonsault and it wasn't leading to the finish, I thought that, what a waste of that move.
Oh, I know. It was
just like, why did he do that move if it had not, just do the moonsault off the top ropes and miss. You're not doing anywhere near the damage and you're accomplishing the exact same thing. No one's even remembering because it's not even the climax of the match. Then to do the 10 Germans, to me, is like, okay, great. Now he's got to do, I know he did 9. Okay. But, it's like, great. It's like the Germans don't count until you get up to number 6. Is that the new deal? It's like, great. When a guy does a German suplex, you can overkill. And I thought last night's match with all of those things was overkill, and I'm not knocking the two guys because it was a tough crowd. And the crowd wasn't into those guys until, which spot was it when they were in the 9 German suplex?
Themselves.
Yeah, about the 6th German suplex, the crowd got into it, and they were into the rest of the match, and then they, so. Anyway, I thought too many badly acted vignettes as well on the show. But overall,
the whole thing with me as far as some of those vignettes was, especially with Spike and Molly, when they first started doing that, everyone was going, well, this is Romeo and Juliet, this is the angle they're doing. And at this point now, it's like 2 kids doing the Romeo and Juliet play in middle school and not being able to act as good as the kids would be able to. Some of the stuff last night was hideous.
Yeah. Crowd not really into it, but it was a sellout crowd, so, we'll look at the flip side of that. The ratings, not good, 4.1, which would be the low for Raw, going back probably, oh, God, I don't know, since probably early 98, so we're going back about 3 years. The lowest of this run, so last week's slight blip upwards did not last, which is not good. In fact, all the ratings for this week were not good at all. Any comments you want to make on the main event? Did 4-5. Any comments about that? And the other thing also,
as
far as the other thing, the first half of that main event, the thing that bothered me also is those guys were out there doing a wrestling match, and it just seemed like all of the focus was on Steve Austin, Paul Heyman, and Jim Ross. It was like it was Steve. The main event was Steve Austin watching these 2 guys in a cage match. It wasn't the 2 guys in a cage match. It was like the match itself, up until about the 8-minute mark of the match, was like secondary to here's Steve Austin at ringside and Jim Ross not knowing how to handle it and Paul Heyman goading him on.
Yeah.
But it was the Steve Austin show, and he hugged Vince McMahon. There's a lot of very interesting and strange.
A lot of very strange things on that show.
Yeah. We will be getting a tape of Tough Enough probably tomorrow or the next day, so of the premiere episode that's going to air on the 23rd. So probably not on the maybe on the show tomorrow, but certainly on the show on Thursday. We'll tell you, I'll give you my impressions of Tough Enough, and Bryan will talk about it as well, because he'll have a tape it, and maybe not right away, but he'll have it within a couple of days as well. So we can talk a little bit about that. Turner South will be doing a special on July the 22nd at 8 p.m., a 1-hour special called War of the Words, with Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair, both in studio for a 1-hour special, talking about their 1985 Starrcade match. So between
wow, how long is that show?
1 hour.
They're going to talk about the match for 1 hour?
No, they're going to talk about their feud, but they're not going to just talk about it. They're going to show clips of their all of their matches and highlight with the Starrcade match.
Okay.
Yeah. What's the Nicole Bass story? Because I didn't get a chance to read it.
The Nicole Bass story, I'll basically read it because it's like 3 lines. Female bodybuilder and former wrestling star Nicole Bass has pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct for biting a cop in Little Italy last fall. The 37-year-old strongwoman agreed to the misdemeanor charge and will serve no jail time. Police say she bit an officer on the hand when he tried to break up a shoving match between 2 groups of people during the San Gennaro Street Festival. Police say someone from one group bumped into a person in the other group, and words were exchanged. So that's it.
Okay.
She's guilty. She bit him.
Yeah, I watched the New Japan pay-per-view also last night, so which was quite different. Speaking of going back in time, the match with Muto and Hase, the 40-minute match, was so, what could I say? If you ever remember, for those of you who are old enough to remember Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk Jr., and if you want to watch it and see what it really was, get a tape of this. It's not bad. In fact, it's quite good. But it's something that like modern American wrestling fans would absolutely hate this match. I mean, they were on the mat exchanging moves, and it wasn't exchanging submissions like a modern day, quick submission thing like that. I mean, it was just like old style, slow build, 40 minutes, very few high spots, very good at what it was, but, wow, what a different match. And then, the Fujita Nagata. I'll tell you the one thing about Fujita Nagata. There's no question in my mind. Zero that Fujita and Takayama was a shoot, because Yuji Nagata is an awesome worker, and they were working this match to look like a shoot. And, I mean, it wasn't 10 seconds into the match where you just go, this is, UWF-style work. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it was a great match. It was actually the second best match on the show. But if Yuji Nagata can only go 10 seconds without showing a hole, Takayama and Fujita they are not that good. And that's all there is to it. So, anyway, it didn't look like it anyway. But I mean, I was going to wait until I saw the Nagata match because I knew they were trying to do the same thing, and someone told me they did the same match, and then I watched it, and it was like they tried to do the same match, but they couldn't do the same match because they weren't working. So that's the deal there. Any other news before we start hitting some emails?
I think that's it.
Okay, this is from Chris James, who goes, I think you missed the point about the Deadpool report on the testosterone site. The writer is claiming that since Triple H never has time off, he never has time to clean the steroids out of his system. And if you think he isn't on the juice, then you don't know bodybuilding. Luckily, me and Bryan are very naive when it comes to that stuff. While others may be more death-worthy in the ring, I can only name a handful of wrestlers that are more juiced up than Triple H.
Oh, come on. Jeez.
Reread the article, you're missing the point. The point is that in a death pool...
No, we understand the point. We talk about the point all the time here on the show. Our point was that as far as guys that are juiced up, I can think of, and not saying that Triple H is juiced up, of course, but I can think of like a dozen off the top of my head that are far more likely to explode than Triple H.
I wouldn't go that... There's a few. I don't think there's like a lot. But the point is that while there are people who do drop dead from steroid deaths, they are very rare. And if you look at the deaths in wrestling, far more of them are due to other drug abuses. And Triple H, there are guys who we've seen frequent pass-outs, frequent arrests, things like that. Those kind of guys in a pro wrestling death pool, those are the people who are most likely to go if you're looking back at the track record, and not the heavy steroid users. I mean, what heavy steroid
users? As far as heavy steroid users, I can still think of.
Yeah, but that's Russian roulette. I mean, just because you use more steroids than the other guy doesn't necessarily mean you're going to die first, and the guy who takes less is going to die. Larry Cameron is probably the best known, what's believed to be steroid death of the last many, many years. And there are guys, there are many guys who probably took more steroids than Larry Cameron. It was just, his number was up and he had the heart attack. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, there may be guys who are doing more or less or whatever, but as far as if you're going to pick guys in pro wrestling who are likely to drop dead, there are people who have recreational drug problems as opposed to people who have steroid problems. Steroids, I think, affect you more later in life rather than, you know what I'm saying? I mean, even in the bodybuilding world, the guys who drop dead in bodybuilding, drop dead from the diuretics, not from the steroids. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have their problems later, and steroids can give you, all kinds of problems. As a lot of the guys who were, the guys who did the steroids in the 70s and the 80s, they had a lot of them had problems later in life, and some of them didn't have problems later in life. But, as far as like the immediate dropping dead, it's just not that frequent. That's, I guess, what my point was. Why I said what I said. It wasn't Doesn't have anything else. Let's see. This is the actually we get many of these every day about Leviathan being the stalker. It is not Leviathan, unless they make a big mistake because he's far from ready. He's certainly not the guy who is planned to be that. Let's see. How much money does Steve Austin, Triple H, and The Rock make from their contracts? It's really hard to say because so much is merchandise. It's like their downside may not even. Rock may have a $500,000.
Yeah, I think he's asking just from the contract.
I think the last downside I heard Rock had was $500,000. I mean, Austin's was $2 million, and I don't know what Triple H's is, but they all make far more than that because they're making a percentage of their, they're in the main events, percentage of the house show. They make their percentage off the pay-per-view. And Rock and Austin, I mean, I don't know what the exact number was that they made at WrestleMania, but $1 million wouldn't probably be that far off for their payoff because that was the biggest show of all time. And plus percentage of their merchandise, and all those guys usually do very well in merchandise. This is from someone who goes, just to clarify an email somebody sent you yesterday regard to FMW on home video. They have recorded totally new commentary and gimmicks exclusively for the tape, which are heroes of wrestling quality, awful, and not funny at all. If anyone's going to buy them, they should buy the DVD because the DVD offers the original Japanese commentary as a second soundtrack, similar to the DVD release of Japanese animation, so you can hear them as they should be. On the plus side, they now have subtitles during the Japanese promo, so you can finally figure out what Onita is saying in between his huffing and puffing. I would recommend them only if you have a DVD player. P.S. We're Combat Toyota Megumi Kudo lovers, as this was implied in the English commentary. Okay, can I tell you something about the English commentary? Every single thing in the English commentary, just throw it right out. Don't listen to a word they say. What happened was you had a bunch of guys who were Hollywood script writers who were given these tapes, and they were told, come up with storylines out of this, and these were not even wrestling fans, I don't think, who came up with the storylines. And so, they just made up all these things, and nothing had to do with any of the storylines in Japan that they were doing. It goes, you can't tell if it's a shoot or a really stupid work. It's a stupid work. Also, they mentioned a story about Mike Awesome trying to save a Japanese boy who was in an accident by lifting a tractor, only for the kid to die and for Awesome to blow out his knee. Is this story true? It is so not true.
Yes, it is.
It is so not true. While the WWF didn't do TBS any favors, who am I talking about? Oh, the Big Show any favors the way they brought him in. Okay, or bring him back from OVW way before they should have. The biggest enemy the Big Show had is himself. He had loads of potential, but his current problem is his inability to stay in shape, which is absolutely true. Let's see. Who will be on Raw first, Hogan or Luger? Hogan, right?
Hogan.
Okay, I agree. Let's see. Have TV show matches hurt the money that used to come from pay-per-views? I mean, giving away all these main events for free? In the long run, they could, but, the funny part was is as wrestling got more popular, the pay-per-views started drawing more and more money, even though they were giving away, more. I think it depends on what match you're giving away. I think if you give away, like WCW did, if you give away the pay-per-view main event,
Scott Steiner for free on TV, that's a mistake.
Yeah. If you give away the pay-per-view main event itself, the match itself for free a few weeks before, I think that hurts a lot because it's not the first matchup. I think if you give away main events, like you put the guys in the pay-per-view main event in a tag and build heat for that main event, in the right cases with the right people, I think it certainly doesn't hurt and may even help. Is there any chance of Sakuraba and Silva still happening? Not for July 29th at all. Later in the year, obviously the plan is for that match. I think I'm hearing like maybe October or November. Sakuraba is just not 100%, and they don't want to put him in there until he is, and nor should they. Let's see. This is someone which it does not take a lot of time to skew internet polls. So this is for us to know that it isn't people who don't have a life because they can do it with a flip of a button. If you're a computer programmer, there's a very simple program that repeatedly hits the page with a proper URL. I had a program running for 27 straight hours voting for Ric Flair as Time Man of the Year. And you know what happened?
You're telling people that...
and they still threw it out, so what good did it do? No, just come up with a program and hit a button. It's not. It's different from someone just going back to that page for 3 straight hours and hitting.
I guess that's true, but
that you can do
you have nothing else going on in your life that you have this desire to skew polls.
Well, everyone does. We get it we're getting it daily now, which is why we never talk about our polls anymore. Let's see. The show on the Sunshine Network. This was a show we were talking about yesterday, which was a combination.
What is the upside to skewing the poll, though? I don't get it. Just to do it.
To prove you have that power to show that Superstars is the most popular show in the WF network.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Too bad they can't skew TV ratings.
They're probably trying.
I think that's why we should pay a lot more attention to those than the polls. The show on the Sunshine Network that somebody asked about yesterday, it's called All-Star Pro Wrestling. It's a bunch of old tapes of wrestling. It's stuff from Indies Global, USWA, NAWA from around 1990 with some new matches with Kendall Windham and the Bushwhackers. Last Saturday, Ed Leslie was still doing the barber gimmick. Okay,
wow.
Well, that's nice to know. Let's see. It's called AIW. Features old tapes from various indies, USWA, UPW, many more. Not the UPW in L.A. Actually, they've shown some old matches of Steve Austin, Jeff Jarrett, and Cactus Jack. The show airs Mondays from 2:30 to 3:30 Central Time. Okay. Will WWF have WCW wrestlers wrestle interleague for a few months like baseball? They will for the next the July pay-per-view. Could Viscera be the stalker? Only if they'd lost their mind. Let's see.
He's a big guy.
He is a big guy,
Looks
though.
crazy.
He does fit that. Oh, that would be. Put it this way. Again,
God,
he is
how
not
about the boss man. Why did I just think of that name?
Yeah. They are not the choices. If it's one of those two, that means that the choice it's supposed to be fell through. Anyway, please tell all your callers never to compare Pride to Vince Russo. That's an insult to all MMA fans. Pride is so much more successful, and they put together way better pay-per-view cards than Russo ever did. This is was a complaint that we've heard a lot of in the last night. Why the hell did the WF job Jericho and Benoit last night? I mean, I am almost sure that they're both going to get like big wins on tonight's show, but nevertheless, that's not defending it because I think it was a dumb decision. Anyway, what makes it worse?
That's the plan, by the way. And
I don't know that that's the plan. I'm just assuming because that's kind of how they think. But there was just no point in doing that. Anyway, what makes it worse?
I have
is
another
Jericho
plan that I don't think would be the best thing right now.
Okay. What?
I don't want to mention the plan. They'll do it. We talk about it this weekend.
Well, come on. Now you have to.
No. Let's just maybe a tag title match of some sort.
What, Jericho and Benoit against Kurt Angle, The Big Show, and Rhino? 2-on-3?
I don't know.
I don't even want to think about it. Anyway, and what makes it worse is that they've already booked the show, so it's not like they may do it Monday, right? Anyway, what makes it worse is that Jericho lost clean to The Big Show and mid-card Rhino. It also makes them look strong when Austin beat the shit out of both of them. I mean, the WF wonders why Jericho and Benoit can't draw in the main event. I'm serious. Did Jericho or Benoit ever win a main event match in the WWF? It seems like every time they're on top, they job. A great way to pop a buy rate for an already shitty card. And that was the most slow-paced and horribly booked Raw I've seen in a long time. Now, actually, we have had some people who liked the Raw.
How'd you like the Steve Blackman versus Saturn match?
It was a bad match. Just a bad match.
Oh, my God. And, hey, one of those guys, who won? Saturn?
Saturn won. He's in the King of the Ring. He's in the final 8, which we're going to get the final 2 of that after tonight's show, I'm assuming. This is from John in Toronto, who has a diverse point of view. He goes, Raw was a pretty good show, but there was something lacking, and I don't know what. It was crowd intensity. And they had good matches.
Wins by the main eventers?
Yeah, that too. The biggest downfall to the show, to me, was having Jericho be put in one of those handicap matches. So now it seems that Jericho's push is slow down, and he won't win the title from Austin. I mean, I don't think it's by being put in that match. I almost think that they are booking by having him lose and having Rhino say, I beat him 3 times, so when he wins the title, I'm the #1 contender, is a way to subliminally tell us that, hey, you know what, he may actually win, even if he's not. I think that was actually the mindset, perhaps, of why they did that interview. At least they accomplished.
That's a horrible mindset.
Okay, well, anyway, I'm just trying to come up with reasons because
that means that fans are supposed to believe that Rhino may be headlining in a world title match in a couple of weeks. How is that believable in any way? Because he beat Jericho 3 straight times? Yeah.
Anyway, so I guess the Benoit Jericho push was to satisfy the Canadian fans while up here for TV in Alberta. No, it was just it just happened to be in Canada. It was just time because they had to push new guys. I guess us Jericho fans will never see him as champion because he's too short to Vince. Funny how Angle was a good champion, but he got pushed down after losing the title. I guess the next 12 months will be Austin, Rock, and Triple H as champs. Rehashing seems to be what they enjoy doing. I have to say, once my WWF pay-per-view package on Bell Express is gone. I don't know. Let's see. Now this is someone who's suggesting Stephanie to be the stalker. Okay, that's a good one. They'll have a hell of a match too. Let's see. I don't know, but I loved Raw last night. All the humor is back. I don't know whether it's Paul Heyman's influence or not. My favorite part, with the exception of the awesome main event, was Angle insulting Undertaker's wife. That actually was kind of funny. The way he did that. But what wasn't funny was the Undertaker just, like,
Killing him.
Killing him, exactly. Like, killing him. Did he ever kill Triple H like that, ever, once? Or The Rock?
Undertaker? Oh, hell no.
No. I mean...
And the best thing is, Angle's the guy that's supposed to be in the main event and supposed to be drawing the rating for this show. He's just killed him.
Yeah. Steve Regal complaining about his useless knob. Actually, I thought that was pretty clever. And Steve Austin hugging Vince. I didn't know if that was funny. That was
creepy.
It was different. It was weird. Well, he said it was classic stuff. Anyway, let's go to Bob Mould. Bob, how are you doing today?
He's not in yet. He's got to set him up. Hang on.
Oh, he's not in?
You're getting a little anxious. He's putting his head.
Let's go to Al.
Al, what's going on?
Nothing. I'm waiting. No, wait, Bob. Point me. Hold
Okay.
up.
Okay, well, we're going to go through this.
Oh, my God.
Hey,
hello.
Been fired? No. What do you think about them saying that, doing that knee injury thing that everyone... I wouldn't have even mentioned it. I didn't see what's...
At least, to me, it says they have faith that he's going to do it and be back.
They did give you a storyline reason. They did talk about him. I don't know. I mean, and Ross sort of covered his base. They showed a bump where he could have gotten a knee injury, although he didn't. And then Ross did say that and other problems. You know what I mean? He didn't say... So he sort of covered himself. It was an interesting way of doing things.
He said he had issues. Hey, Dave, it's Bob.
Bob, you're there?
Hello.
Hey, Bob, what's going on?
Good, Dave. Brian, thanks for having me on. This is a great pleasure for me to be on your show. I'm a listener.
It's a great pleasure for us to have you on the show.
I'm a listener. I'm a longtime reader. We were looking at observerlivechat.com just a minute ago. People are going crazy. It's out of control here.
It's out of control.
It's hot.
It always is.
It's so hot here. All right.
Bob, why don't you tell everyone, first of all, your background as far as... you mentioned a little bit about the music, but as a wrestling fan, I mean, you've been a wrestling fan for a long time, and how you actually got hooked up with WCW.
Yeah, just to let people know, I live here in New York. I'm 40 years old, and have been a long time wrestling fan. Got into it when I was, like 9, 10 years old, as most kids do. Grew up in upstate New York, so I watched a lot of the Vachons and Rougeau's promotions. Was able to get some Vancouver stuff on TV, and of course the New York stuff. Moved to Minneapolis in 1978 to go to school at McAllister College, and got hooked up.
That's Wade Keller's college.
Yeah, is it?
Wade Keller went to McAllister College, yeah.
Crazy. Well, I went there for a while and got hooked up with some people who were involved with the AWA. A fellow named Jim Melby, who used to write for Norm Keitzer's Wrestling Review, and he did a lot of the in-house publications for Vern at the time. And got to be good friends with him. He sort of smartened me up. Started meeting other people like Les Thatcher and other folks, and did some stuff for Wally Carbo up there. And then I guess it would have been sometime in the late 80s, met some of the people who were working working for the NWA, which then became WCW at the time. People like Gary Juster and Jim Barnett, and Jim Ross was a good friend. And just sort of, whenever I had somebody's ear, I'd just, yak like a fan and say, I like this, I don't like this, and they'd go, oh, you got some pretty good observations. And time went on, and somehow I fell into the gig in September of '99. I got called on to be to be a creative consultant at WCW.
Now, was that Eric that called you?
Pardon me?
Was that Eric that called you?
No, it was actually I got the call from Bill Bush. It was I think it was the day after Eric took leave.
Yeah. As I remember, it was like that was Bryan. If you remember when I wrote that article. The one that we always refer back to?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. This was all roughly the same week. Eric was gone, and it was time for a new beginning, and Bob Mould was brought in, and I was told that, and I didn't know Bob at all, and there were some people in the company who goes, you would like him because he has a logical mind to the business, and obviously they had gone about a year without anyone like that. and basically you were there for about just a couple of weeks, and they brought in Russo.
What had happened, I got brought in, I think Eric left it was September 9th, if I'm correct, because I remember it was 9/9/99, and I Don't know if there was any irony in that or not, but I think a couple days later was the Fall Brawl pay-per-view down in North Carolina and the subsequent Nitro. Bill Bush, who had basically stepped up to the plate and was getting ready to run the company, was again a friend of mine, and I had purveyed some ideas about what the company could do to him. So he brought me in. We watched the pay-per-view together, and I just sort of pointed out some things that I thought would be good, some things that weren't so good, and tried to just say, let me sit in on booking. Let me try to get a feel for how things are going and make some recommendations. It was an interesting month. I think that Dave, you'll remember. I think I sent you an email a couple of weeks ago. The thing that spurred on this appearance, I guess, is a lot of fans calling in with booking ideas and things and going, why can't they do this? Why don't they do that? How come these guys have all this power? You can't possibly imagine what it's like to be sitting in the war room or to be sitting in the booking sessions. And it was incredibly exciting and intimidating, and I just, for the first month, sort of sat back and watched. Tried to get a feel for, the personalities involved. At the time it was Nash and Sullivan, Mike Graham, Ross Foreman was sitting and taking notes, Craig Leathers, Annette Yother, Dusty was freelancing a little bit at the time. And it was pretty wild. You really can't imagine what it was like. It was there was a lot of things that were very apparent very quickly that could be fine-tuned, and I hit it off really well with Nash and Sullivan and Graham. So I guess I had their ear a little bit, and we set out to try to make some fundamental changes. I remember, I think it was in early October, I'd gotten a call from Bill Bush on my cell phone. I was out to dinner, and he said, I've got an opportunity to bring Vince and Ed in from New York. What do you think? And, obviously I was, watching my own ass. I was like, I don't know if that's such a good idea. That runs really contrary to the clean finish, chestnut game theory, St. Louis type booking that would probably get this place back on track. And, or the all Japan style booking, whatever you want to call it, basically, beat the champ in a tag and, on you go, like you were talking about earlier in the show. And, he said they might come in. I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to have a place here. He said, I want you to stay, try to work with them. And for a while it was good, but, as the show goes on, I'm sure we'll pick apart why I was diametrically opposed to the direction the company was going.
Well, from when you came in, first of all, when you first came in, this is before Russo was in and Eric had just been departed. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about you thought that maybe they should go to that all Japan St. Louis style thing where basically to make wins and losses actually important again.
Yes.
As far as like the different people on the committee, were they in agreement? Because you had different people, but at the same time it had been so many years and there had been so much garbage finishes for some, under Bischoff and things that, I think were partially responsible for the decline. I mean, getting to where it was in September of '99, the decline from, let's say, from '98 when it was really hot. Mm-hmm. Watching as a fan, what did you think they were doing wrong, and what did you think they needed to do to basically stop the bleeding and turn the thing around at that point?
Well, there was just so many bullshit finishes, over and over and over. Every week, people were, people just left the show screwed. I as a fan walked away going, okay, that meant nothing. That's 3 hours of my life I'm never going to get back.
Bryan used to tell me that.
Right?
Exactly what I used to write.
I got to see Megadeth and Chad Brock, but there's another channel that shows music stuff. I thought it was pro wrestling. There was a lot of guys in the middle of the pack that Chris and Eddie and Dean and guys like that weren't getting their chance to shine. It was a mess. It was a complete mess. And I think, I think there might have been an environment created there with the guaranteed contracts and, so much horse trading going on. The guy, nobody wanted to do business. It was going to be really, really hard to get the top guys to start helping to elevate the middle pack guys. There was always the size issue. The big guys have trouble with smaller guys, and that's the nature of it. I mean, so you try to think of creative ways to work around it. One thing I thought would be interesting is you've got a guy like Bret Hart, you've got a guy like Billy Kidman. There could be a resemblance there. Why wouldn't you have a situation where Bret could mentor Billy Kidman? Billy's getting beat down by a couple of heels. Bret comes down for the save. They watch each other's back. You can do tags. And, it leads to a number of possibilities. Bret and Billy could stay together. They could split. There's all kinds of stuff. The idea of taking some of the more legendary guys and putting them in tag situations where, they're not clogging up the top of the deck all the time. I think within the committee, between Mike Graham and Kevin Sullivan, they're old.
They're small guys.
They're small guys, and they're also old school as far as booking. I mean, they know the logic, of wins and losses and making things important. So I don't think there would have been a problem getting that on board. Kevin Nash, you guys are awful hard on him. Everybody's real hard on him. I mean, maybe he's done some stuff that people don't agree with, but he's got a pretty contemporary mind as far as pop culture, and I don't think he ever really got to exploit that. I don't think there was an environment there for him to do the things he wanted to do with character development. I mean, there was battle, there was struggles going on between the production side and the talent creative side. So I mean, those were things that we had to address as well.
How did your peers in music react when the news got out that you were writing for WCW?
Well, I think some people were a bit taken aback, maybe because, the WWF is always, I guess, the lightning rod for the business. And, at that time, what their product was like. People were like, oh, he's going to write that, he's going to write that sex and violence stuff. And so I just went on my way. I mean, there's been other people. I mean, Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins did some stuff with ECW. And, I mean, there's always been a crossover. And, the businesses are not that dissimilar. I mean, they have things in common. They're not the same, that's for sure. But I don't know. People, I don't care what people thought.
Did they ever talk to you about maybe doing some music for WCW?
Well, Jimmy Hart was doing a lot of the music at the time, and I sort of made it clear that I didn't think that would be the contribution that I'd want to make to the company. The kind of music I do, I don't think really sits well with the intro music that the wrestling audience is used to. Jimmy did a lot of that stuff, and Jimmy was the lead singer for the Gentrys way back. So
way back.
Great guy Jimmy was. But so I think they were pretty well covered with.
He was the lead singer.
He was the lead singer of the Gentrys. Keep on dancing.
I didn't even know that.
Keep on dancing,
Cinnamon Girl?
baby.
Oh yeah.
I knew he was in a band. I didn't know he was the lead singer.
He was the lead singer. He's like 18 or 19 years old. I have that record.
If you add it up, he was 18 or 19 about 100 years ago, which makes him 100 and... No, I'm not really.
He's kept really well, though.
He looks great for his age.
And Jimmy's such a sweet guy.
He doesn't look a day over 90.
Oh my
like
God.
a Dick Clark.
Sort of.
Almost.
But the interview that you've got up on your site, Dave, that was Jimmy's take, I think, on things is very, very accurate. I read that and was just like, God bless Jimmy. He's right on again.
Yeah.
So.
Now what? So now you're in there, and Russo is in, and this is the first run of Russo, which would be that September, October, November, December, or actually October, November, December of 1999, which started off. I mean, he did a tremendous job of self-promotion. He came in with a lot of hype, and there was a lot of interest. The first show did a good number, did a lot of things. The first couple weeks, we were impressed because, he does work, Russo worked really, really hard.
Absolutely.
But ultimately, where I think he fell apart was nothing had any meaning. He was, if anything, trying to overdo stuff. What was it like in the rooms with him, and was anyone, and how did Russo react? Because we always got the impression from the outside that, Russo was always, when things weren't working, he was always trying to throw blame everywhere. And at the beginning, people believed it, but then after a while, it was almost like, quit. It's like your stuff that you're actually doing is the weakness. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Vince Russo's a really, really creative guy. He's got a lot of great ideas, and it's just, trying to make it all tie together and make sense and make a coherent show. I wasn't sure where it was going from week to week. we'd sit in and booking, and everybody got to pitch, everybody threw stuff. That tried to talk about big ideas, talk about small details. Vince was very much a week-to-week guy. I think he was in a situation where he felt like he had to get the numbers up, hell or high water, and that's going to be week-to-week booking. You can't look 4 or 5 months out if that's the mentality, and if that's, presumably how your deal is set up. So, I don't know. It was, sometimes I'd walk out and I go, where are we going to be in a month?
I think that was one of the biggest mistakes that WCW made was, I guess, structuring that contract where if the ratings went up, he would get a raise, whereas there wasn't really any incentive to make the pay-per-view numbers go up, which is where it should have been.
Yeah, or the house shows.
Yeah,
because the house shows went to hell during that period.
The house shows,
because there was no long-term, and he was turning people every week, so there was no, nobody knew where anybody would be.
Absolutely, there was no program that was positioned to be a draw on the road, and you guys know, everybody knows how hard it was to get anybody out to work, anyways. Again, you go back to those guaranteed deals that the previous regime was handing out. And, guys are just like, why are we going on the road? Business is soft. Look, we're only doing 3,000 paid. It's these nitros are the thing. And, that creates an environment where nobody wants to go to work on the weekends. And,
but isn't part of the job description of being a professional wrestler that you actually, do wrestling matches?
Yes, but
that's where I used to talk to some of those guys, and I heard the stuff, and this would bother me when I would talk to the guys, because what happened was the top guys were starting to get away with not going on the road. So then you had the guys who were right underneath the top guys who thought they were the top guys, but they weren't quite, and then they started complaining, well, this guy and this guy didn't go on the road. And then Buff was always like the one who was not quite a top guy, who seemed to never go on the road. And so it was always like, well, I'm better than Buff, and he's not going on the road, and he's no showing. And so why do they pick on me and make me go on the road? And I was always like, well, that is your job. You were hired. And they were making a lot of money. And it was like almost like, God damn, you're making a lot of money. Go on the road and build the company. But nobody wanted to, because I think that there was no locker room leadership from people who really cared about the company, which is one thing that the WWF always had over WCW.
Absolutely, and everyone knows how their deals are structured up there. That you're still working on the gate as well as your lowball, your lower guarantee, and that's an incentive to show up and do your job. That's how it works in my business. You get a decent guarantee, you get an appearance guarantee versus a percentage of the door. You sell the tickets, you make more money. It's real simple. And it was very confusing, but you got to pick the battles one at a time. When you come in and you're an outsider to the business, people, certain people in the booking committee are looking at you like a mark, and you're just trying to sit and listen and learn and see the opening, and again, it's just picking battles, and the fact that nobody wanted to go to work, let alone go to Saturday TV, it wasn't a battle. That was like, I can't call these guys up and say, damn it, you got to go to work. I don't care. I don't care if I don't care if there's a beauty pageant, that you got to go to this weekend or something. You got, or whatever it was. We
got an autograph signing somewhere. Conflicts with your actual job.
Oh, one of the things that was really, really hard during that period in September before Russo came in was the Ready to Rumble situation. If people go back and remember, there was a movie being made. I walked in and we started trying to lay out some programs in booking, and somebody from JJ's office would come in with the talent sheet with unavailable due to movie. There was no way in September and most of October that there could be any coherent booking because of the way people were scheduled on that movie. A lot of people never thought about that when they were saying, oh, this stuff doesn't make any sense. They're just throwing matches out there. I'll tell you what, it was pretty damn hard when half the guys had to be in California Sunday, Monday, Tuesday to film the movie. And that was stuff that was in place before I came in. I just looked at it and go, well, let's at least put some good workers together and do some 15-minute matches to keep people in the building interested. And I don't care if if it goes across 2 segments. I don't know if that's good or bad TV business, but let's at least give the people in the arena some wrestling matches to try to keep them in the game for those 3 hours. There was a lot of stuff. It was crazy.
And hope the movie makes it big.
Exactly. And hope that maybe someday somebody from the movie can be champ or something. I don't know.
Well, somebody was.
Whatever.
David Arquette.
God bless him.
How were the meetings as far as productivity versus just straight out arguing?
Well, I come from a creative environment where you work with people, and if you have mutual respect, you can agree to disagree. And I think that can be really productive if you feel very strongly about something. You can stay with it and stay on it. And, ultimately, you've got to defer to the boss. That the boss is going to make the final decision. All you can do is plead the case. Productivity-wise, it takes a while to get going. Some days you're just sitting there and you're throwing stuff around, and people are joking and laughing, and people are dissing other people in the business and whatnot. You're just trying to grab at straws. It's a creative situation. To me, before Russo and during Russo and after Russo, the one thing I've tried to be careful of was not stomping on somebody's idea if they threw something out and just going, "Oh, that's crap," you've got to be. You've got to.
We do.
Well,
that's our job.
Yeah, but you guys probably make more money than I did there. So, no, seriously, you try to be sensitive to what people are saying. You take everything. I would take everything that was being said somewhat seriously. I sort of got the nickname, the voice of reason, for a while, because, where other people would just jump down everybody's throat, I would try to sit and listen and see it from all sides. But,
So basically everything pretty much stopped at Russo.
Well, once Vince came in, with Vince, he was open to, when Vince came in, it would be Vince, Ed, Bill Banks, Nash, Sullivan, Graham, myself, and, floaters. People would float in and out occasionally just to try to, shake it up a little bit. But ultimately, Russo had the final say, as to how the show was going to get laid out. We would basically walk away from a booking meeting with maybe 4 or 5 more segments than would actually air. So, there was like an overflow of stuff, because the talent pool was real big, and he was booking that tournament at the time. So, there was a lot of stuff he could do.
Now, in that tournament was where I first soured on Russo, because at the very beginning when he first came in, we had him on, the show and everything, and obviously he's very creative.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem I saw in that tournament was that he was far too creative for his own good, and he was booking. It's like I always thought that you could sit and write all kinds of funny stuff, and you can sit and come up with all kinds of scenarios endlessly, especially at the beginning before your mind starts burning out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot better to do maybe like 1/3 of them and make those 1/3 mean something, rather than the Vince Russo TV, where when it was over, your brain's going zzz, you're in a fog because there's been a million angles out there and not one of them registered.
Yeah, it's like having a handful of ADD kids. It's just like 100,000 ideas flying at you, and you can't filter out the good and the bad ones. There's just too much stuff. I agree completely. Had some of those great ideas been paced out across a year, and with some long-term planning and just some simple how to draw money philosophy, everything would have been beautiful. But
comparing his time in WWF and WCW, it's pretty clear that he had a lot of ideas in WWF that Vince McMahon shot down, because Vince McMahon was the final say in that company, but in WCW, Vince Russo was the final say. And were there ever ideas that Russo came up with that, like, everybody else in the meeting just went, there is no way in hell we can do that, and they shot it down?
Not really. Vince Russo was the head. He was the head guy. You try to put up a reasonable opposition, but ultimately, I think he and Ed were gonna put the thing together the way they wanted it.
Had their mind set on something that was done.
Yeah.
Because that tournament was we're going back to the tournament thing. When that tournament was over, I was looking back and I was like, we had 31 matches with 32 people, or not quite 32 people, because I think Medusa got to go in twice.
Yeah, she got beat to go on
stuff. and the rest of Chris Benoit, right? And like every single match ended in outside interference. So when it was over, it was like, except for the Chris Benoit matches, I think every single match in that tournament stunk because of outside interference or not enough time or the wrong, or people matched up that couldn't have a good match, or whatever it was.
Actually, one match that I thought was pretty interesting was Lash LaRue, who was sort of, when I first walked in, Kevin Nash said, "Who's a young kid that you think could use a hand up?" I said, "Oh, I think Lash could be okay." And we were in Louisiana one night, and we sent him out to do that promo with Okerlund. He got over great. So when tournament time came, that was, I guess people were looking at it, well, that's your project. And he worked like a 12-minute deal with Scott Hall, and Scott made him look okay. And that was to me, I was like, oh, that was nice, that was interesting, it was okay. But I agree with you. The Medusa thing just blew the credibility out of the water. At that point it was like, well, it really doesn't matter who's got the belt, because we all like Medusa, but she got beat and goes to the next round. just beyond the fact that it was the men's title, the sort of the cornerstone of the promotion, basically the keys to the bank, and whatever.
Now, that was one thing where I think Russo never did understand, is what you just said, that the world's title's the keys to the bank, and he was just booking it almost like it was fun, and I have some ideas. And then you had the other thing, which was the cruiserweight title, which was the one calling card that WCW had over WWF because they never pushed small guys. And you had, wasn't Medusa and Ed Ferrara feuding over it at the end? Yeah, and I had a number of problems with that. Ed's a dear friend, but there was just, there were so many problems, with that character and with that scenario that, whatever. I think most fans at that point were just like, this is not really that funny. It's not that hilarious to be making fun of Jim Ross. And especially because it came off so mean-spirited.
Yeah, it was tough. Like I said, Jim's a friend as well. And, it just wasn't. I don't know. Everything gets explained away in wrestling. It's just TV. It's all work. Whatever. I don't know. I was new to it. I just sort of bit my tongue and sat there and just said, yeah, that'll be segment 5 every night. Goes on. It ends at 8:55, and then people turn on to Raw, and there's Jim Ross. Whatever.
And then they could go in there. That segment 5 was always the one where they could say it got the highest ratings of the show because everybody knew that everyone was going to switch right. That fourth quarter was always the highest rated quarter. So whenever somebody had their little project, we used to always joke about that. They put in that fourth quarter and then brag, and it was like, that didn't mean anything. The fourth quarter was always the highest rated.
Absolutely.
Bischoff, when he did that stupid Tonight Show stuff, even didn't kill the ratings in that quarter hour.
Yeah. Did anybody notice that the 6 weeks before Russo was in, that we always put Bill Goldberg out there and tried to get him to work a 9 or 10 minute match with somebody who could actually get him along. And I think we were trying. That was something when I came in, nobody realized that you had to be at 8:58 and a half, that you had to have something really good going on, not only to keep people from going to Raw, but that's the time when every TV show ends and people are surfing. And if you've got something that's spectacular right at that moment, you might catch them. And and people were like, oh, you're right.
When you were there, and looking at the end result of what happened, was there a period? I remember during our emotions going through this whole thing, in September of '99, I thought this thing could easily be turned around. This is what you need to do. It was you had first of all, the talent was there. Mm-hmm. I think a real big blow to me, and a lot of people didn't see it at the time, was when Malenko and Saturn and Guerrero and Benoit left, because you took kind of like the heart of the order, and you took the one advantage WCW always had over WF, and that was the superior wrestling, and you handed it to the other side, and also kind of handed away the future because you had just lost Chris Jericho as well, and the Giant, who didn't turn out to be as big a star in WWF as we expected, but was a big star in WCW when he left, and you were kind of left with this roster of aging guys without any new acts ready to take their place, and then they kind of tried to force feed the O'Hares and Palombos long before they were ready.
Yeah. Going back to January of 2000, the situation with Chris and Eddie and Dean and Perry and the other people who were involved in that situation, just to sort of illuminate what had been happening that led up to that. There was a situation in December, and I think a few websites talked about a large meeting that had happened that Bill Bush had called. Our boss got us all together and wanted us to all air our grievances at the table. so to speak. And there was a meeting where, everybody, Sullivan, Graham, Nash, myself, Vince, Ed, Bill Banks, JJ was in, Bill was in. And everybody just went around and spoke frankly. And it was a weird meeting because I remember one of the things that I said was, I don't know if it's a good idea to have guys going out there 5 times a night. It's just having been a performer, and again, it's not the same because I never was a worker, so I don't know. But the more times you send a guy through the curtain, the more, beyond just the diminished pop, the likelihood of somebody stepping on a cable sideways or something happening, you're going to start seeing the injuries, mount up. Guys are just going to get worn out because they're going out there, they're pumped, they have to ease down, and then they get pumped up again. And if you do that 3 or 4 times a night, it's tough. And that was my contribution to the, discussion, and, went around the table for a couple hours, and then, we all got accused of stabbing, Vince in the back by Vince. And I was just like, my God, what's going on here? This isn't, he just, really took offense to anything that was coming out in that meeting. And I was like, I'm not long for this place. We stayed on through Starrcade, and, thought that was actually, I know people didn't like that finish, but I thought it was pretty strong. It was flat, and you had to send them home unhappy to get to the next place the next night with the NWO thing, which I thought should have had a different name, like, Club New York or something. But, cause you can't do the sequel. The following week, that was when Brett got hurt, and then Bill got hurt in Salisbury when he put his, hand through the windshield. And then the next week, I think we were in the Astrodome, and it was the deal where they ran over Sid's car with the monster truck. And right at that moment, I just said, I'm out of here. I just don't want to be part of this. Something really bad's going to happen, and I just want to get out of here. Because I'm too much of a fan. I have way too much respect for the wrestlers and for the business that I guess I was stupid to think was what I maybe fantasized that it was. I was just sort of sick to my stomach at that point. I went home. I just said, I'm out of here. Bill Bush was like, come on, come back, at least do the Saturday show, do something. I went down to have a meeting, and that was, I guess the decision had been made that they wanted Russo to work committee. And I think Bill Bush took that to Vince, and Vince said, I'm just going to sit home. Possibly taking a cue from some of the other guys in the company. And we got left, having to rebook that whole pay-per-view where we did Chris and Sid for the belt. And I was pushing awfully hard for Chris to win that match. I mean, I was pretty adamant about that happening, and I also thought that the next night Dean and Perry should get something in a tag situation. I've heard people say that those guys, that Chris was promised the belt as a way to gloss over something that was happening that I wasn't aware of because I wasn't there for those 2 or 3 weeks. So I don't know what the truth is with that, but clearly there was a lot of friction. There was a lot of personal issues, I think, and it shouldn't be any secret to people that listen to your show, where a lot of those problems probably.
Benoit, Sullivan,
yeah,
like that,
I mean, yeah, there's clearly some, there's public knowledge that, there's a situation there, and, Kevin Sullivan was in charge at that point. He had been given the book, and the buck stopped with him, and we put the belt on Chris that night. And, Kevin was the first person to shake Chris's hand when he came back through, and I was the second person to shake his hand.
What do you think in hindsight? Because the big thing is, I saw this whole thing from the outside developing.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'll just tell you that the night before that pay-per-view, I mean, I was out at the movies, and my cell phone, which very few wrestlers had, was ringing all night long with these reports from various people who were all swearing that, they were going to that pay-per-view and they were going to quit if Kevin was named the booker. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking that, looking at it from the outside, my answer would be to name Terry Taylor the booker, because everybody seemed to have this issue with Kevin, largely over Chris Benoit and trying to everyone be Chris Benoit's friend, and it created this thing. And I just thought Terry Taylor would make Terry Taylor would make a good compromise candidate, and if they make that announcement, then everything will be fine, which, of course, they had already made their decision with Sullivan and those guys. I think that there was the feeling those guys really wouldn't leave. And there were like 16 to 18 guys on Sunday night that were going to leave, and it ended up being 4. Mm-hmm. And I was almost surprised that there were 4. I kind of did expect I kind of did expect 3 because I really knew that Benoit was going to go, and I figured that Eddie and Dean were with Benoit for so long that they would go with him, and Perry, ended up going with him, and Shane Douglas said he was going to, and everyone knows what happened there.
Yeah.
But right at that period, I mean, what are your thoughts as far as would that have been a better compromise, or was it just one of those things where they had made the decision with Kevin, and you can't have guys. Once you get mid-card guys, so to speak, or guys dictate who your booker is, then whoever the booker is dead meat because 4 guys will get together and go, I'm going to go to New York if you don't replace the booker.
I think you hit it right on the head right there, and I don't think it was the first time that some of the people involved in that in leaving were involved in something like that. I think a similar situation I had been told had come up a couple of years prior. That Eric Bischoff.
What was that? Because I don't.
There was somebody had told me it was not the first time those guys had gone to the boss and said, "Get rid of the booker or we're leaving." And
those particular guys.
I think some of those people. Again, I wasn't there and I didn't get the whole thing, but it was not an uncommon scenario. It had happened at least once before, and I think Bill Bush at that point just said, "Enough is enough." Now, just, again, that was I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown after we did that pay-per-view, 2 TVs. I didn't sleep for 5 days. I was sick to my stomach about the whole thing. Because if there was anybody who was, waving the Chris Benoit flag at that company, it was me. There was other people as well, but, clearly it was Chris's time. Given this, what the roster was, people were down with injuries. And, frankly, he deserved it, I was a big Chris Benoit fan and still am, despite all the things that went on. I'm not sure why he agreed to take the title and then leave the next day, but that's his prerogative, I guess. But, I don't think it was promised to him to try to do anything other than I think the prevailing sentiment was he was the most qualified person at the time. To go one step further with it, when you bring Sid into the picture, I think a lot of people, really got on WCW for, having Sid take the belt later that week.
Well, he was in a no-win situation.
Well, if you think
the company was in a no-win situation. Once Benoit left with the belt, you were left to pick up the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
After that whole situation, it made the belt useless.
It was tough.
And then you had half your roster was out with injuries, and then a couple of guys figured that it was a good time to get injured, and
exactly.
You were working with the skeleton crew, and I think Hogan wasn't even back yet.
No, Hogan came back. Hogan came back a little after that, but yeah, that was exactly the situation, and when I was asked what my thoughts were on the situation with those guys leaving, my recommendation was give them time off, send them to New Japan. We can make something out of this. Just at least cool it off. If they're that hell-bent on getting out, don't let them out of the deal. Send them over to Japan. Have them work a couple tours. That's 6 or 7 weeks. They can come back. There might be a story there. But, that was my recommendation. Ultimately, Bill Bush had to make a decision, and he was the boss, and he did what he had to do.
It's really amazing looking back that they even put that belt on Benoit at all, because it wasn't like a big secret that he was ready to go. And, in fact, Sid was doing an interview on another radio show, and he's talking about how Kevin Sullivan specifically told him to make sure his foot was under the rope. And, his impression was that Sullivan knew going into this match that Benoit was going to leave. And, if everybody knew, and Sullivan
everybody knew
known, why do it?
Everybody knew there was a possibility. All those issues were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, the possibility that strong, I just can't see putting the belt on somebody.
Oh no, I couldn't either unless it was all settled. There were so many things. There were so many things so weird when all that went down. How much do you think the loss of Bret Hart and Jarrett on that show, but Bret Hart and Goldberg crippled them in the early part of the year? Or do you think that because Russo, at this point Russo had. Well, I guess though they went down and then Russo left. It was actually all happening at the same time because. I think that the thing that got Russo was when he wanted to put the belt on Abbott, and that's when Bush said, okay, I think maybe it's time for a committee.
Yeah, but perhaps. I got called in on the Friday prior to that pay-per-view. Like I said, I went home and was giving my notice to legal, and Bill was saying, please come back. We'll find something to do. for you, we'll find something for you Saturday or whatever. And I was just like, I don't know, Saturday's not going to work because Vince is going to want that to be, a highlight show, before they got rid of it and then gave away 30% of the cumulative rating to sell ad rates, which I'll never figure out why they gave the Saturday show up. But that's probably another show.
Thing that you just brought up that just reminded me. Now, when the decision was made to cut from 3 to 2 hours, and I think it was the right decision, but at the same time, between that and giving up on the Saturday show, you just mentioned like so much of the company's money was ad rates, and I mean the thing was they had to get that rating from like a 3 to like in the mid 4s to make up for what they were losing by giving up the Saturday show and also by cutting from 3 to 2. And I don't think that anyone thought that through.
I agree completely. I have no idea why Saturday was given up. It served such a great purpose. I mean, it was a place where you could, a lot of the younger talent, a lot of the power plant people, Jimmy Hart and Mike Graham had some good ideas down there, and they were doing what that was the right thing to do, was grooming guys and getting them ready. And, beyond the fact that, that 1.7 to a 2.2 rating that they were getting on TBS, it was one of the highest rated shows on the network, and it added to the cumulative rating that was used to sell ads. I have no idea why you would do that. I have no idea why anybody would do that. That just boggles my mind.
Now, how would you describe that period of early 2000, before the first half of 2000 or so, before Russo and Bischoff came back? I mean, I kind of look at it like you're there, you're very limited. You've been crippled by some guys leaving. You got top guys that are injured, and at the same time, I think it was pretty clear. While Russo was gone and Bischoff was gone, I mean, the rumors were out there that they were ready to cut their deal, waiting for the ratings to go. So you're in a situation where, I mean, the way it was described to me, that period was you had guys in there that were looking to build for Starrcade. And at the same time, to build for Starrcade meant that you weren't going to be doing any hot shotting. And yet at the same time, those, week by week ratings were still going down.
Yes. And
you know what I mean? It was like one of those things where, oh my God, we got to get you were serving so many different masters. And these guys were sitting there waiting for it to go down to jump back in.
Didn't the slides sort of slow down during that period, though?
Well, enter Brad Siegel at that point. Those, I think when Russo went home, I think one of the first calls was probably to Eric, and I would guess the second call was probably to Brad, just to say, well, this is what, this is the way we got to go with it. Meantime, we went, we slid a half a point. It wasn't pretty. It was tough. We were trying not to hotshot the place, because I mean, people had just been so numbed out at that point that it was just like, okay, let's keep the belt in one place. Let's get Sid for better or worse, and everybody can argue about that, but at least we parked the belt, and we're just trying to get it ready for when Bill came back. He was supposed to be back in April. I don't know. He came back like towards June, right? I mean, yeah. I was gone in late March. That's when I
think it was late. I think it came back in late May.
Yeah, I mean, we were just trying to make.
Early June. It was because I just remember looking at it. It was just about a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, we were just trying to make. We were trying to keep the belt constant, trying to get something strong, trying to get some new guys up and running. I mean, Vampiro. I think we had him up and going pretty strong until he got into the top mix and things started happening. I think when he got positioned alongside Sting, Hogan was a big Vampiro fan, but I don't know how the relationship with Sting was going. So that was a project that was tough. Crowbar.
Because that actually brings something to mind. There were a lot of feuds that went on during that period, and the Hogan Kidman one actually was after this period. Sting and Vampiro was during it, or actually at this point I think they were. No, those feuds actually they would have been right when Bischoff and Russo were in, where the idea was you had a somewhat of a guy being built by feuding with a star, and the star basically killed him. But this was actually after Bischoff and Russo were back, and we remember Bryan and I would be sitting there watching this program, going like, these programs are like so counterproductive for what you're trying to build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the whole theory was that just working with these guys would give them a rub, which absolutely made no sense if you ever watch old squash matches, because when jobbers got squashed in the 80s, they weren't getting a rub, they were getting killed.
Absolutely. The Vampiro situation, that was, I got to be friends with Ian and felt pretty strongly that he could be a strong face with the company. He could work strong and stiff when he had to. So it was like, okay, his stuff, when it's strong, it's believable. He and I had talked about doing, sort of some vignettes that would be real life vignettes where he would talk about Vampiro, the character that went to Mexico and got mixed up in a lot of ugly situations, and some of the he had a rough life, and then he was also a big star, and then he was in WCW, and I think there was a real good story there that Ian the person, Vampiro the wrestler, to try to make it a little more real. Anyways, the Vampiro Sting thing, the Sting was supposed to help save Vampiro. That was the idea. It was, he was coming in to save him, and then that's when we got the boot, and Russo and Bischoff came back, and I think they kept that storyline going in a completely different way than any of us were envisioning it. Basically, Sting was there to help Vamp, and at some point something would have happened, but certainly not that quickly.
One thing I wanted to ask you about before we start going to the phone calls, pretty much tell us, I guess, your departure, which would be, I guess, when Russo and Bischoff came back.
Oh, yeah, it was the middle of March. What had happened, I forget which pay-per-view it was. It might have been the Hogan-Flair strap match, and Sid and Jeff, I think, was the double main event. And we were put together the TVs for the next few weeks, and it was when we did the Sid turn to get ready to go to Sid and Hogan. I don't know where it would have led, brother, but that's where we had to go because they both went over strong in the main event. We were, I think, the following week we were down in the Keys working on TV. We had just done a Florida run, and had sort of been tipped off that something was going to happen. So, we're just sitting there trying to get the TV written, trying to come up with ideas. And I think Sullivan knew that the writing was on the wall, and I hadn't been in the business long enough to really know, but sort of could definitely pick up a vibe that there was a change about to happen. And we had Monday laid out, and we're halfway through Thunder, and got a call, just said, they're going to bring Russo and Bischoff back, and I just got on my phone and called Diana Myers and said, Diana, I'd like to exercise my 7-day leave. I want out of the company. Tell me where to send the computer. And that was that. So.
What were your thoughts as far as when they brought those guys back, and as for what ended up happening? What surprised you? What didn't surprise you? Over what happened over, say, the next couple of months with Russo and I think everyone kind of knew that Russo and Bischoff were not going to last a long time together, and then one would go and double cross the other, which is exactly what happened. Yeah. But the one thing, the end result, which was the death of the company, I don't know that anyone was really seeing that one coming until, let's say, early the next year.
Well, it came pretty much 1 year to the week of those guys getting the company back. Right, Russo and Bischoff. So I think there may have been something, well thought out ahead of time. Brad Siegel, I don't think really ever gave full support to anybody who was put in the position of running the company. I don't think he ever gave Bill Bush power. Ultimately, I think a lot of people got in. I think a lot of people got in Brad's ear. I think there was people within the company that went around their boss's back and went to Brad, which in the corporate environment is pretty much not the way you do things, particularly at an AOL or a Time Warner property, and that cost. I think that cost Bill his standing, and then when you had Russo and Bischoff, and I'm sure there were people going around behind, doing an end run behind them as well. It's a pretty ugly business, but that's the entertainment business, folks. It's not meant to be. It's only pretty on TV.
Yeah. I had one quick question about Russo. Did you ever get the impression that maybe he had sort of a callousness about the wrestlers actually being people? Because he had some guys doing some really crazy, dangerous things that probably they shouldn't have done.
And paid the price in many cases.
Yeah, well, when Jeff went down, when the thing was Snuka, I was watching that at home and just went, oh, that's great. There goes your main event, and then, little did I know we'd get called in to pick up the pieces. I can't say for sure. I really can't say for sure. I think Vince Russo had a really strong vision of how he wanted to be perceived in the wrestling community. And I think that may have superseded slightly, other fundamental things that go into making the business work.
I got a question that's coming from this. How much, and good or bad, do you think, because, the feedback, the immediate feedback on the internet, which is something, the very new phenomenon in wrestling, affects, because it's one of those things where too many guys, I think that everyone is guilty of playing to that audience, and, quite frankly, that's not the money audience.
Yes.
I think everyone knows that. But you can't help but be sucked into it anyway.
Well, it's that immediate gratification, I think the WCW live show, when Vince would just run to the show and just, how'd I do? It's like, I don't know. I guess that's
not the people. He's asking the wrong people. The people that tell you how you do is the people who buy tickets to the house shows that weekend, and they never got it.
Absolutely. It's I think anybody that's in the entertainment business in a high profile situation, you can fall into that trap of surrounding yourself with sycophants and people who will tell you exactly what you want to hear, and everybody's got a different bullshit filter, and everybody sets it differently or has it set differently for them. I don't know. I think it's important to take a look at what people think on the internet, but I think it's more important to maybe sit down with somebody like Matt Williams when he shows you the minute by minutes, and they do focus group studies and say this crap ain't getting over. I think that's also.
That reminds me of something.
Actually,
they did a survey.
I know,
and they asked what people wanted, and it was exactly the opposite of what you guys were doing, but you still did it.
Who's that? Which study?
That was the Matt Williams thing.
Yeah,
I remember there was the guy who came up with a survay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And said basically the people wanted more wrestling and less bullshit.
Well, that's what we were trying to give them when we had the deal, and. We knew, I guess I knew, Dave, as a fan, the WWF audience that was a come and go audience. They loved that product for a moment, that real, shock TV sort of Jerry Springer, whatever kind of thing. And the WCW audience was more of a traditional wrestling audience. My perspective, the reason I got brought in was because I thought you had to go to a stronger style of wrestling. And it's just to be a copy of the WWF or to be Vince Russo's vision. I just don't know if that was initially the right move to make, and ultimately, the company's gone now. So I think it was gone.
Particularly a bad copy.
Yeah, that's a matter of opinion. I just find that. I find in the corporate situation with Time Warner and AOL, you have to keep that product in check. You can't, you couldn't stretch it as far as he wanted to. All the stuff with standards and practices every week. It's just these were battles that were taking up too much time.
But ultimately, they had nothing to do with any of the money drawing angles anyway. They were just like battles over can you call Ron to sing fat or not. Whether they could or couldn't, it made absolutely no difference to the fans sitting at home that didn't know about these battles.
Yeah,
and if they could, so what?
Or Hoovy hitting Liger with a tequila bottle. It's come on.
Well, going with that one with Hoovy, that whole thing was, and I don't know what the politics of all that was, where everyone's at, but I know from having to deal with the Japanese that night. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to explain, that their IWGP Junior Heavyweight title changed hands because a guy hit another guy with a tequila bottle, and the reporters there are going like, how can we lie about what happened so we don't embarrass, our company and Liger and all this? And I'm thinking, well, if they have to if they can't report on what happened, then there's probably no reason it should have ever happened.
And there's really no reason it can have a continuing working relationship with New Japan either.
Well, that fell apart too.
Yeah, you gotta realize how I felt when that happened too. I was just, rolling my eyes like, oh my God, this is like somebody who lives for, J-Cup stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is nice. This is real nice. That's hell of a finish that was. I don't know.
And then the next week they come up with Psicosis holding that belt because Hoovy broke his elbow.
Yeah.
It's just like, it was just like, oh, God.
Yeah, it was one thing after another, absolutely. And and I know when we tried to have the junior tournament that, and Sullivan wanted to put the belt on Prince, whatever. You can argue whether the choice was good or bad, but the intention was good. And I think, people again looked at it like, oh, they're going to screw this up. I mean, I sat with Tanea and we tried to figure out, can we get this over like legit? Can you help? Can we do something with this? The intentions were good, but there was an awful lot of forces, a lot of opposing forces at the time. There was a lot, there was people inside the dressing room stirring stuff up. There was very few bright spots from February, March, April, believe me. I look back on it and I'm like, wow, man, I may have been in over my head, but at least, I went down with a fight at least. I don't know.
We want to start taking some phone calls. We have some people that have been really patient. So let's start with Patrick in New Orleans. Patrick, what's going on?
Hey, Dave.
Hey.
Dave, I have this great idea for pay-per-view. All right, let's take 3 good workers, but this is a good thing. Even though we need to build up the pay-per-view, let's make the other 2 job to everyone else, and then let's go into the pay-per-view with 1 strong heel, and then no one will think anyone will win. And not only that, let's take the second big title and put it in the Kane, and let's put it against Albert.
Yes. I know.
Those are some wonderful ideas.
Why is this happening?
Hopefully we'll find something out in the next 24 hours to answer that question, because I'm at a loss.
Where would you?
I heard, from, there were guys that were really at a loss last night as to, why they did this, their whole, the whole thing was, I guess it's to give Rhino a push, but it's like, Rhino will have his time if he's ready. But
Rhino doesn't need the push.
Well, it's not his time. These 3 weeks are Benoit and Jericho's time, and it's certainly not. That's not their time to make other people right now.
I know. Austin doesn't need the title, though. They should give it to Jericho. Austin does not need that to get over as a heel. He just needs to do heelish things.
Well, the one thing about that title though is the money matches for that title are still Austin against Rock and Austin against Triple H. And
I'm not saying there right now. So while you're doing,
you can do the quick switch, but then you don't.
You don't want to value the title though by doing all those quick switches.
You can do, but if
they put it on Jericho, he's going to lose it soon.
You can do one.
Rock's going to be back.
Yeah.
Where do you guys think where do you think they should go on this pay-per-view?
Well, I think that they should. Now, in hindsight, I think they should go with Benoit as a single challenger, or maybe do the Benoit Jericho thing where they do the single match, so someone you just on the show, and have the winner go on to challenge. The only thing is that they have to keep giving Benoit and Jericho wins, and by not doing that, I think that now when I look at what they're doing,
now that it's already been done.
Yeah, now that it's been done, I feel like I did at the end of WCW, where I'm sitting there going like, okay, now if you're put in there, what would you do? And I throw up my hands because everything I would have done has already been undone.
Yeah. Last night was like Nitro, I felt.
I did too. Until the main event.
Until the main event, yeah. But on the undercard, the bad skits.
Well, even the main event, it was a good match, and I was watching it. And as soon as when Benoit kicked that cage open, I'm like, all right. Well, actually, when he did the headbutt, I'm like, just have him pin him.
Benoit just had to climb out after that headbutt. Angle can win a big match like at the King of the Ring or something. It's Benoit's time.
No, I know. He should have pinned Angle, have Austin run in, beat up Benoit for like a few seconds. Was Jericho there?
Jericho was injured earlier.
Have Jericho come back out, beat up Austin, throw him out of the ring, instead of like doing like a submission hold, just throw him out, and then you can get this fear into, you can just build up everything instead of having Austin stalking around on stage like he's an idiot.
I love I got a question for Bob and all this. Sometimes, and again, this almost relates to something we talked about earlier. Sometimes I think that the guys that are booking are thinking so much, and they're thinking 3 steps ahead, and they forget the basics. And it's like, okay, since the thing that makes sense is for Benoit to win, what we'll do is we'll keep teasing Benoit win, but we'll swerve him and we'll have Angle win. And it's like, great, you just had Angle win, you just beat your guy that's in the main event. You know what I mean?
You just swerved yourself out of a buy rate.
I think they got a way out of it, but I don't know if they're going to go. With the 3-way, I think the logical thing is that Jericho costs Benoit, turns heel, goes with Austin.
Don't you think it's too soon?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's too soon because then the flip flop is coming out of the match with Chris.
But Benoit can't turn heel.
No, Benoit stays face, and you turn Angle face to go with him because those guys have a mutual respect coming out of the most brutal match that in the the history of the company if they push it right.
Yeah.
And then there's heat. You can bring Stephanie back with Angle, and that sets it. While Hunter's gone, there's a lot of stuff they could do.
But
that requires
Albert versus Kane.
Albert versus they're just out of big guys, and they threw him in.
Give him a title shot. Do you know how over
against Kane?
It'd be a decent match, and he would get over.
He might actually. It'd be a weird match. The one thing
big man versus small man. Malenko wins. People think, okay, he can beat a big guy. So
that's not happening because Malenko's retiring, so they're not going to have him beat Kane. So.
Oh, when is he retiring?
He's been talking about it. I don't think there's a definite date, but it's kind of like one of those things where I think he's going to retire and be a road agent at some time, relatively soon.
And just go back to his school?
No, work on the road.
Working at WWF.
Yeah.
Oh, but sort of backstage?
Now, what Bob just said regarding that match from last night, that requires on tonight's SmackDown, a concerted effort to get that thing over as the most brutal match, because if they don't do it from tonight, by next Monday everyone's forgot about it.
They've got to hit that thing 4 times tonight.
Which match?
The match from last night. They got to hit last night's match like it's something special, because if they don't, again, it's like those things.
They need to show. They need to show that those big bumps from every possible angle. They need to talk to everybody about it. They need to get it over so big. I was hiding under the table when Kurt was up on the cage. I said he's going to do it and he's going to miss. And what the hell are they giving this one away for? And why is he even up there?
Off of that moonsault, do you know how bad? How screwed up everything was?
Anyone or Benoit too. I didn't mind when he did that missed moonsault. I was going, okay, Benoit's going to crawl out the cage and win, and that's a great finish. Then the match kept going.
And then it wasn't the finish.
And they did the Sportatorium thing.
Yeah.
Same with the diving headbutt. That wasn't the finish either.
That should have been the thing. I'm not a physics expert, and I don't go get hitting in the head, but I don't think getting hit in the head with the cage like that when you're hitting the shingles is going to knock you out compared to, let's say, jumping off the balcony and hitting nothing but a mat.
No, but that's okay.
Or even that jerk.
It was okay. It was okay as a finish. I just hope that those big spots, if those big spots got to be played up real big.
Did you guys, Dave and Bryan? Did you guys get the sense that fans are so desensitized at this point?
Absolutely.
That those were the only things that got a pop, and it's like, okay, where do you go now?
Yeah,
where do you go
now? It took him 6 German suplexes before the crowd got up, and I was so sad. And when it was over, I'm going those guys had one hell of a match, but I wasn't happy when it was over because I'm going they did that German suplex off the top rope, and the people popped momentarily and then forgot about it. I think part of it was Austin being out there. Austin's star power just so overshadows everybody out there because Austin, Triple H, and Rock have been portrayed, and Undertaker as the big 4, and the number 5 guy's way behind. And I think that when Austin's sitting out there, everyone's kind of paying attention. What's Austin going to do? What's Austin going to do? And these 2 guys in the ring busting their ass.
Well, that's another thing when Austin's out there is I think fans kind of knew that this thing is not going to be over till Austin gets involved. So why should we care about any of these near falls?
Exactly.
Okay, I want to get another caller in, but I just want to ask one more thing. During your time in WCW, was Malenko going to go on to anything big? He had the U.S. title. Really, he should have gotten a world title shot automatically because the U.S. title equals world title shot historically. I know Hogan had the title. But,
well,
the Apocalypse angle, anything.
Well, when I came in, that was the Chris and Perry and Dean, Eddie, and Shane were pretty much, I spent time with them. They had a 6-week program laid out they wanted to do with all those convoluted teasing turns and turning sides and all that stuff.
I'm sorry, I'm going to hang up now so you can get someone else. No, thanks. You can keep talking about it.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Those guys were laying out their own programs at the beginning when I got there. They would come to me, I still got the sheets at home. I would sit with Shane and sit with Dean and we'd, look at the stuff and try to make it happen. People get hurt and, all kinds of stuff happens when you're booking. But as far as Dean, Dean is a great talent, but again, God, I don't know. There was definitely a role for somebody like Dean, a prominent role, and Dave, you're saying he might possibly become an agent. That's great. I mean, he's obviously got a great mind and is such a great talent.
I want to get through as many callers as we can, so we're going to start with Matt in Vancouver. Matt, what's up?
How you doing, guys?
Hey.
Hey, yeah, Dave, I heard you talking earlier that you said you had an idea of who the Fed was going to have as the stalker, but you never said who it was going to be. I was just wondering who it was.
It's one of those subjects that we'll talk about when it's... I can't talk about it, okay?
All right.
All right.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Let's go to Wes.
Hey, guys, how's it going?
Hey.
It's going good. Wes, how was the show over the weekend?
It was a good, overall, it was a pretty good show. The crowd heat, I thought, really helped. It was one of those shows that, if the crowd heat wasn't good, it'd probably be rather dull, but the crowd was really into everything, just about with the exception of the Haku K-Quick match. But overall,
come on.
No, I mean, even Molly, Holly, and Jacqueline, which is actually a pretty decent match, but people were into everything. But a question for Bob. In regards to Bill Bush, everybody seemed to think he was a nice man, but was he really cut out to be, the leader? He didn't really have a lot of wrestling knowledge in terms of, people maybe working him in the back.
Yeah, that's a good. I think that's a real valid question. Yeah, Bill is a great human being, and I think he was qualified for the job. But I think you make a good point about getting the boys working him a little bit. I think Bill was very trusting of people and realized, it was sort of that, fool me once, shame on me kind of thing, fool me once, shame on you, whatever. I think he knew when he was getting worked, and I think he sort of was getting a pretty good grip on, who was working who, and he just never had full support from the people above him in the corporate structure. I think he was alongside Eric for a lot of that run, being the main financial guy. I think he knew how the business worked, and no doubt. And with JJ and some of the people there, I think he had enough people that could help him through that. He just didn't have enough time. Nobody had enough time. Even Russo, I guess, could be argued. Didn't have enough time. I don't know.
Now, he had enough time to kill the company, but
that's true. That's true. I guess he had more than enough time.
So the one thing. Looking back on the history of the company over the 13 years that it was in existence, except for that one run under Eric, it never really was. I mean, there were some periods where it was okay. There were some periods where it had, really, really good wrestling, but financially wasn't necessarily that successful. I mean, this model, this Turner model, I mean, when it first came in '88, I was going like, this is the greatest thing that ever happened to wrestling because, you've got this thing, they got CNN and they got all this, and it's that stuff. Vince didn't have that advantage, theoretically, although Vince actually had more of an advantage because he didn't have to deal with all these people that were all getting in the way, I guess, in the long run. But, you're talking about, like, in that corporate model, can wrestling survive with the nature of who wrestlers are and how they operate and everyone swerving everyone? Was it doomed to failure, or was it just that guys didn't have enough time and the upper management just didn't handle it right?
I think at the end of the day, those guaranteed deals, while great for the talent, and God bless them for getting that kind of money out of the company, that ultimately was the downfall because at that point they had the power over the company. At that point, I think you have to look at the day-to-day leader and say, is this, did this person facilitate this shift in power? I get whether Eric did that knowingly or unknowingly. Who knows? I think that was really the downfall. I think the model of a corporate owned wrestling company makes perfect sense, and it should, given if you can keep the talent cost, if you can keep all the overhead reasonable, keep it commensurate with the result. Yeah, it should work. There's no reason it shouldn't. I mean, AOL and Time Warner are in the entertainment business.
Now,
I think a corporate-owned company might work better maybe a decade or so down the road, just because I think a lot of the guys coming up now are a lot less likely to be the carnies that the guys are today and were, 5 or 6 years ago and have been since, I guess, the beginning. Yeah.
It's going to take a complete cultural shift in the business to, for that to truly work. Those deals were so tough. I mean, anytime.
No. It's a question because I've seen in many eras where guys have gotten guaranteed money. Now, it wasn't big guaranteed money, but it was guaranteed money, and it worked. And even in Japan, they're basically everyone, they're salary guys, and they work their ass off, and they have pride in their product, as, Bob, you well know. I think is it a nature of Americans versus Japanese mentality, or is it a nature of, when they put other things in the contract that didn't reward, basically they didn't reward hard work, and then everybody was just sitting back, trying to figure out the easiest way to collect their money, whereas in other wrestling companies, everybody worked their ass off to collect their, because I've seen, like, even ECW, everyone, ECW, those guys were under salary. I mean, they didn't get more if the pay-per-view did well. They didn't get more if the house did well. And whether their product was good or bad, nobody can fault or suggest that that anyone in that company basically didn't work hard. I think that the problem was that there came a day when everyone kind of figured out that hard work isn't rewarded, so let's get by as easily as we can, and then they were doomed.
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing, because basically all around the world there really is a sort of competition whether you have a salary or not. Whereas in WCW it got to the point where there was no competition because those guys at the top weren't going anywhere, and therefore, they didn't have to do anything. They weren't going anywhere no matter if they were on the road or not. They weren't going to lose their spot.
Well, I think, I can't speak, I got to know a lot of the wrestlers, and a lot of them do take a lot of pride in the craft and, take pride in the history of the business. In Mexico and Japan and places, outside the U.S., I think it is a different mentality. Mexico, it's a very, almost a spiritual thing. Japan, again, it is a cultural difference. I think within WCW, it's a tough business. A lot of the wrestlers work hurt, and some of the wrestlers know how to work being hurt. And I think sometimes when that loophole makes itself apparent, people just take the easy route, and that's a hard line to draw, because people, God, I'd sit back there, I was at go position every night. I was the last stop at the curtain, giving time cues to the refs, and the whole bit, with Russo beside me yelling, "Tell him to play the other music," or whatever, the chaos that was, and I'd see those guys come back, hurting real bad, and I don't know, who's to say who's working an injury or not. Sometimes they were very convenient, but hey, that was the system that was set up for those guys to work in.
Anything else, Wes?
Yeah, I just want to ask Bob a specific question. What was up with that NWO return and that New Year's show? I know Russo was planning on that being kind of the thing that, at that point his job was being rumored in jeopardy. What was the thought behind bringing the NWO back? It was kind of a retread angle.
Well, I knew that I knew he was going towards that. It sort of became clear the last couple of weeks. I mean, Vince didn't say a whole lot flat out in the booking meetings about, this is my 3-year long-term angle that's going to come to fruition on the Monday after Starrcade. It just sort of was like, quick, let's order some NWO stuff. And I thought to myself, I looked at Nash, I go, isn't there another name for this? Like, couldn't we call this Club New York, or couldn't we, do something else with this? Because, people aren't going to buy this NWO retread. And, again, I was sitting over in the corner going, well, nobody heard that. Let's see what happens. So.
Okay, let's head to Andy. Andy, what's up?
Hey, how you doing? Bob, first of all, I'm an enormous fan.
Thank you.
I'm very, very influenced by it. I do actually have a wrestling question.
Great.
Pretty much just based on your experiences working with WCW, do you think that you would want to write for wrestling again?
I don't.
Maybe not for Vince. I know Hogan's will be hiring soon, but
or Savage.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Matt Rats.
Matt Rats, yeah.
Well, I think Matt Rats is sort of an interesting prospect. I think my days may have come and gone with the wrestling business. I mean, of course, once you've gotten a taste of it, there's a part of you that always wants to be in it because you're on the inside, and that you're I don't know. I don't think I'll ever have another job in the business. I still have a lot of friends in the business, and I just try to stay in touch with them, and just move on with my own career. I just got done finishing recording a new album this past weekend, and
thank God.
Hopefully have something up in the fall, and I'm looking forward to getting back to the job that I know and love a little bit better than wrestling.
Right, I've been looking forward to that.
Thanks.
Just real quick, I know you guys got a lot of calls and not much time left. Are you sitting home watching like Raw and SmackDown and everything and saying, I could really do this better?
No. I mean, I just try to suspend disbelief and be a fan again. There's, I look at the scenarios that build up to the money matches and go, I just hope everybody's protected and the belt gets protected and everything makes sense going forth from that.
Great.
But beyond that, no, I mean, like I said, when I saw that release German, all I could think was, wow, that was like the stiffest All Japan, Masao Kawada, dropping on the head kind of thing I'd seen in America in years, and just hope that everybody's okay and that they make the big deal out of it, on Thursday that it should be.
Bob, Bob,
Thanks.
as a fan of Japanese wrestling, what are your thoughts of New Japan this year as far as like the mixed up with Pride and Inoki's ideas? It's very, I mean, in many ways, if you're an old fan, you kind of can see where it's going. Yet at the same time, when you watch the matches, you're seeing like, I almost feel like that they almost like denigrate their old style of pro wrestling to cater to this work shoot thing, which has a lot of believability, but also has limited television appeal. Do you know where I'm coming from?
Yeah. I've only been seeing the Japanese stuff sporadically since I started at WCW, just because that you can only imagine how well because you're in the business, but how all consuming the day-to-day business becomes where you can't see the forest for the trees. So I'm not really that up on the Japanese stuff. But yeah, the work shoot thing, I mean, over there again, I think there's more of a tradition with the other promotions, and it'll be curious to see where it ends up. I mean, I guess it all stops and ends at Inoki's deal, right?
It always is. Let's go to Dave in St. Louis. Dave, you're going to be our final caller.
Hey, what's up?
Not too much.
Do you think some of the music themes that the WCW wrestlers had anything to do with their downfall?
No, but I think the thing I think one of the things that greatly benefited the WWF, and it was one thing that I brought up in booking, and they started to do it once I left, was I said, look at Austin. I said, that song is not over. The Breaking Glass is over. It's Pavlovian. You give people a 2 or 3 second indicator as to who's coming out. Everybody jumps up out of their chairs, they get the pop, and then you start the music.
I mean, as a musician, did you ever have any input on any of the themes?
Nah, I remember when Mike Modest
came. Did you ever
get
depressed listening to any of the songs?
Jimmy did what Jimmy had to do. That
was Jimmy Hart.
Jimmy did a lot of the stuff, and some of it was canned music. I mean, the only time I ever got involved with music was the last couple of weeks I was there, and I sort of sensed we might be gone, and we got Mike Modest in. I went out to the truck and just listened through the stuff that was laying around to try to find something that was close to Chosen One, which was what he was using in APW, I think. And I'm glad Mike's on tomorrow. Tell him I said hey.
Yeah,
he's a great guy. God, somebody with a theater background, and they couldn't do anything with him.
Yeah, the funny thing with I mean, his luck was just like in the last couple of years was just incredibly bad. But the other thing with Mike is that he's a good talker, and I almost felt that nobody tried and go, okay, let's see you do an interview. Oh man, you can do an interview. It was like one of those things where, you're an indie guy, maybe you can work in the ring, but we're never going to give you. It's not because I kind of felt like. He, having seen him do interviews, he was never even given that chance.
Well, my thing was just getting him in so that JJ and Arn Anderson and people like that who could appreciate it would see him and go, we got to do something with him. Once we got him in, then he had to be a character. Again, the same thing with Chris Daniels. I mean, I had a nice scenario laid out for Chris. I thought, like a Jim Rome type behind the scenes interviewing guys and saying, why couldn't you get out of that finish? I could have done that for 6 or 8 weeks, and then he goes in and beats the guy and goes on a winning streak. I mean, there are a lot of things that would have been nice to do, but, Mike's case, yeah, I mean, somebody that was overqualified for the position, and he just got, pushed to the back because, he came in under the Sullivan regime.
Yeah. Bob, we're out of time. Bob, I really want to do this again because we only really scratched the surface, and I know a lot of callers wanted to call in.
We did only scratch the surface.
If there's any time in your schedule to come back, we'd love to have you back.
I live in town. It's just 8 stops on the subway.
Awesome.
Thanks, you guys. It's again being a fan of the newsletter and of this show, it was truly an honor to be on, and yeah, let's do it when the time's right.
Okay, good, awesome. And I want to remind everyone we're going to have Mike Modest on tomorrow, so we'll see everybody tomorrow at 5.